Welcome to the Encouragement for Work podcast with your host, Mark Griffin, founder and owner of In His Name HR. Each week, Mark interviews nationally known thought leaders from corporate America, higher education, churches, and ministries. His goal is to bring you great ideas that help engage your employees, shift your culture toward higher performance, and increase employee loyalty at the organization you lead. Each episode features an idea or process that's made a tremendous impact on employees and employers alike. Now sit back, relax, and listen in as he delivers encouragement today through this episode's special guest.
Hello, and welcome to the Encouragement for Work podcast. I'm your host, Mark Griffin. Today, we're going to be meeting with Theresa Sidebotham. Theresa has an incredible employment law background. She'll be sharing her knowledge with us as we discuss our topic, Let 360-Degree Leadership Assessment Help You Create a High-Performance Culture. Theresa is an expert in helping faith-based business owners build the kind of culture and environment that is a testimony to their faith. That's really what attracted us to having Theresa on today's podcast. Is her great experience, because just like In His Name HR, Telios Law firm believes in building in their mission, vision, values into all they do from a business perspective as well. Theresa leads business and policy development, manages employee concerns, negotiates contracts, and investigates misconduct so that they can express their values through ethical business practices. Theresa, welcome to our podcast. We're so excited to have you here. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit more about your background? Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I'm excited to be here. So I came into this from a slightly different angle. I was actually a missionary kid. I grew up in Indonesia, met my husband at Wheaton College, and then we did a variety of things, including, he was in the Army. We served on the mission field for a while. We have 4 sons, so I was primarily working on raising them, and then went back to law school and found that was all great background. My heart right now is helping ministries and businesses create a terrific culture, fulfill the calling that God has called them to, take good care of people. So if you think about the legal area, it's mostly employment law, though not entirely that. We do some constitutional law and some general business law. But I think of it as the people problems, which I think tees us up well for the topic of discussion today, right?
It exactly does. And that's why I'm excited to have you on today, because many people look at, 360-degree feedback programs. They don't necessarily look at it from the employment law or legal perspective. They look at it more from, that's a strategic planning item, or that's a training and development item. But you and I both know that using 360-degree leadership can help develop high performance, but also help develop high performance organizations. So with that being said, what's one of the greatest hurdles you see when you're working with organizations, and you even mentioned doing 360-degree feedback? What's the greatest hurdle?
Well, Mark, the thing is, we're usually too late. The horse has left the barn, it's standing empty. I get called in when there's complaints, termination issues, abuse issues, misconduct allegations, employees who don't feel heard, who have complaints about bosses and managers. And at that point, what we're sometimes looking at is a full-fledged workplace investigation, which we do. And that is an important tool that has to be done sometimes.
Absolutely.
But so often when I'm involved in one of these investigations, what happens is I'm seeing allegations. We're not talking, in many cases, we're not talking about people who are predators or evil. We're talking about people who've hurt people's feelings. They've been involved in poor management. They didn't have all the skills they needed. And some of this is exactly the kind of thing that the 360 evaluation gets at. So had they found out sooner what they were doing wrong, had their organization trained them better, had employees had a chance to give their opinion in an evaluation, we could have avoided all this downstream damage. Not always, but sometimes. So it's definitely a helpful tool.
Sure. So what I think I hear you saying is most organizations don't do it, and then it ultimately causes them pain and issues down the road because they weren't able to manage that poor performer, that poor manager well in advance. And my experience, like yours, especially with religious exempt organizations, many just don't know how to hold people accountable. They're fearful of holding people accountable. So without a tool to assess the capabilities of the leadership capabilities of the manager, it really allows managers to continue to act poorly in the workplace without that balance. Any thoughts around that?
Well, that's so true because there's often not a mechanism to find out what a person's direct reports or peers think. So the boss has a certain view of the person that's working for them, but people very frequently act differently with their bosses than to their subordinates or their peers. And so getting a handle on what's happening and getting that early so that you can do something about it. And by the time you've got a formal workplace misconduct complaint, at that point, it's probably too late to do the 360 because at that point, it's not sufficient as an HR response and as a legal response. So you said people think of it as a training or development tool. It is. Preemptively, it can be a great way to prevent legal problems, but you can't wait until you've actually got the legal problems to do it.
No,
And
exactly.
yeah, and just looking over those areas that you guys cover when you do those evaluations, so much of that is exactly the kind of thing that employees complain about. And the language that they'll use when they're filing the formal complaint is toxic workplace, spiritual abuse.
Exactly.
I'm being bullied, maybe I'm being harassed, but, not formal harassment like sexual harassment. But when you really dig into it, sometimes they just lack management skills and they didn't mean to do any of that.
And you're exactly right. Or they haven't even been trained on basic concepts like harassment in the workplace and how to deal with those issues. We find that a lot of organizations, out of fear, don't train their management team, and they're really not isolating themselves from lawsuits because, as we know, the legal standing for, I think it was Boca Raton and Farragher, if you train the leadership team around sexual harassment items and other harassment items, you're isolating the organization from lawsuits. If you don't train them and you don't take the reasonable care, you really put your organization at risk. And that's all part of developing your people. So I think I agree with you. It's almost too late when you have a case, when you have a lawsuit, and we say, hey, should we do a 360? Yeah, it is too late. We need to do it preemptively, well in advance. What other experiences have you had as far as approaching organizations that are a little bit resistant to doing this type of work? What would you tell the executive leadership? Many times as we're working with clients or potential clients, well, we don't want to do 360s. They're too harmful, or we don't get valid feedback, or we did them in the past and it didn't work. What would you say to the naysayers?
Well, I think there's a lot we could say. One thing is if your managers are lacking in certain areas and you find out, you can train them and improve them. The fact is there are also toxic managers, narcissists in the workplace, et cetera, et cetera. And those people, you're not going to find out if you don't do something like the 360 because those people kiss up and kick down. And so the experience of their subordinates is far different from the experience of, the people that they're schmoozing with. So those people you can identify and get rid of. The people who are non-malicious but just lacking in skills, you can train a bit. And then I think it really all comes down to how well it's done. Everything from identifying the right people to talk to for the 360, maintaining confidentiality appropriately, having an experienced administrator, probably such as yourself, working with them so that they can really get good value out of it. Because if you're just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall, what's going to happen is that people will manipulate the process, whether that's possibly an employee who's got a grudge, whether that's possibly a manager who's fairly toxic and, wants to massage the process and find out who is saying what. I mean, there's a lot of ways it can go wrong. So I sympathize with organizations on that.
Exactly.
But yeah, but usually the solution is to do something right, not to not do it at all.
Exactly. So you have two great points that we can talk about, and that's the confidentiality and choosing the right people. And you're right, it's incredibly important to choose the right people. And also in choosing the right people, making sure that you have a confidential methodology on the way you're going to collect the data. So the way in which we like to do it is have at least 15 points of reference, 15 different people they're going to be interviewed through an internet web portal with questions about the leadership competencies, the 10 competencies that each leader demonstrates. We also take all the information, any of the narrative, we collate that, and we do it in a meaningful way that it doesn't allow the leader to identify exactly who the person is. And if we have an outlier, if it's one or two people out of the 15 or 20 that's just bringing absolute complete malarkey and negativity to the process, we'll take those two out as outliers when we meet with the leaders so that they know that this is going on. You have two people. And typically leaders know they're going to have a couple employees that go rogue on them, and it might not be truthful.
Sure.
So yeah, the right people is really important. The other aspect that we think about is, and this happens quite often, we meet with the leadership team. The CEO agrees that we're going to do 360-degree feedback. And then we have a leader that's, I'm a marketing manager. I don't really have anybody that can give me 360-degree feedback, so I'm going to stay out of the process. Well, we kind of let the leader know, hey, if you're a manager and you're leading marketing, I think within 3 months, you should have 10 or 15 people within the organization that know you well enough that can give you leadership feedback.
Sure.
So go out and start developing those relationships. So we really try to get leaders to develop the relationships. And then as far as the confidentiality piece, you can comment on this last statement, is we have had that issue. We had an organization where we pitched it to them, hey, here's how we can do 360-degree feedback. They chose to try to do it themselves. The information got compromised and all the trust was lost in that whole organization. They called us back in to help. Took about 2 years to try to get that organization in some type of trusting relationship. So you got to be careful if you try to do it yourself. You got to make sure that you guard the information. Do you have any more thoughts around the confidentiality or who we choose when we're doing the process?
Yeah, so on who you choose, I think it's not just the person that's being evaluated, but also, other leaders who might speak into that process, because it's, it'd be too easy, for instance, for me to just choose people that I think are going to talk nicely about me. So there's got to be some objectivity to that. And then I agree on the confidentiality, and that might be another reason to do the 360 evaluation early and not have a workplace complaint, because once you're in a workplace complaint and investigation, you may not be able to keep that information confidential.
No, you can't.
Yeah, so there's that.
Yeah.
And like so many things, surgery and legal work and expert HR, there's some things that you really would do better to have people who do that professionally do the work for you.
Exactly.
You can really mess things up yourself on some types of things.
And people have, and I often tell people, I know how to use scissors, but I don't give myself a haircut, right? So why would I do that? You can use a pen and paper, but why would you try to be an HR person? It's going to cause too many issues. So we have a couple more minutes left that I would like to talk to you about, go a little bit off topic with, and it kind of stems out of this confidentiality in the 360 degree. We've been talking potentially to organizations about ethics hotlines and having an 800 number so that C-suite individuals, if they have an issue with the president or a CEO or the board of directors, that they have a third party that they can reach back to us. Is that something that you see growing in the next couple of years? Because we do see that growing as an opportunity as an HR firm, not just for privately held Christian-owned businesses, but also for Christian higher ed and ministries and churches. Any thoughts on that, Theresa?
Yeah, I think so. And the reason is because it's difficult to have the complaint process adequately protected. So within any organization, before someone makes a complaint, whether it's sexual harassment or whether it's some kind of financial fraud issue, they've got to feel reasonably safe doing it. And usually they don't feel reasonably safe doing it, and stuff goes, unchecked for years, and then you have a big blow up. So the hotline is one way to try to create a safe space for people to file a complaint. Now, there's still, things to be managed with that. As a completely anonymous complaint is quite difficult to investigate. So,
Sure.
it doesn't take away the problems and issues around complaints in general, but it is a nice way to collect complaints that shows good faith on the part of the organization.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We look forward to, in the next couple of weeks and months, exploring that and perhaps offering that as a resource to our clients. We're already considerably in the Title IX space. We had Christine Chapman join us just in the last 2 weeks working with clients on Title IX for Christian higher education. So the ethics hotline kind of fits nicely with that.
It does.
Theresa, you've been a wonderful guest, great encouragement to our listeners. In closing, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, if anyone in the ministry or business space is interested in following some of our material with the Telios tip or our training materials, if you go to telioslaw.com or teliosteaches.com, you can sign up for some free resources there and see what else is going on with us too.
That's wonderful. Thank you. We will include all those links in our descriptions to make it easy for our listeners to subscribe to your newsletter. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and God bless. Bye-bye.
This episode of Encouragement for Work has been brought to you by Job Shepherd. Post-COVID-19 recruitment has been unquestionably hard for employers, with many struggling to find quality employees in the aftermath. Religious exempt employers have had an especially difficult time. Welcome to Job Shepherd, a platform that will change all of this for you. Job Shepherd was created to meet the demand by Christian employers, including ministries, camps, churches, colleges, and Christian for-profit companies in their search for qualified job candidates. Now, for a limited time only, employers post a job for free. Job seekers, come join us. You are always free. Learn more at www.jobshepherd.com.